All power to people.
Good afternoon, ma'am. It's raining so hard, I brought rubbers and coat to fetch my little girl home.
I'm afraid you've made some mistake.
Ain't this the 3B?
Yes.
Well, this is it.
It can't be it. I had no little colored children in my class.
Oh, thank you. There's my little girl.
Piola, you may go home.
I didn't know she was colored. Neither did I.
I hate you. I hate you. I hate you.
Viola. Viola.
If parents haven't done their internal work, they will treat their children differently based on the way that they look. And this is a huge problem. I can speak from the Afro-Latino experience just because that's my background. But you'll hear it a lot, like, oh, you'll be so much prettier if you straightened your hair. We got to avoid the sun because you don't want to get too dark, things like that. And you'll hear that from your own family who's the same color as you, if not darker. So beyond anything that you get as an adult, right? Because if we look at it, the things that you hear as a child are the things you carry with you as an adult. And it's hard because when you lose trust in your family circle, then it's harder to trust outside of it, because these are the people that you're supposed to be able to rely on. These are the people who are supposed to have your back. These are the people who are kind of like you because you share the same blood. So it's hard. It makes people isolated, and it's easier to isolate yourself if you or feel isolated if you have this experience growing up. And this is definitely a holdover from slavery and from the Jim Crow era, because, you know, the lighter skinned you are, the more likely you could be to pass, right? And that gives you access to areas of society that you would not normally be able to access if you were visibly darker. And at least in Latin America, this is basically the goal, right? There's a phrase called mejorar la raza, and it's just like, basically the goal is to marry someone lighter skinned than you, all the way to the point where you're way down the line, your descendants are just, they look white. That's the entire goal. So it's, depending on where you go, it gets intensified or maybe less intense. But yeah, I don't know if you guys have had any experiences with this growing up or in your adulthood.
It's crazy because when you think about, like, say, athletes or artists like Steph Curry or Drake, as a community, we consider them, like, we call them light-skinned niggas, or some people will say, like, oh, you acting light-skinned. So it's just crazy to see the effects of that and how we actually put each other down depending on how light or dark our skin is, still to this day.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely, like, I know there's a lot of memes about, like, oh, like the light skin stare that people put on. And it's like, again, it's like that extra like confidence because, oh, I'm lighter, so I must be better looking, you know, or just acting cocky in general.
I grew up mixed, and I have curly hair, and pretty much throughout my whole childhood, I straightened it all the way up until like my junior year of high school, just because of what you're saying. Like, everyone taught me that would make me look more acceptable in society. So I just straightened it all the way till it's like completely damaged, and even then I felt more normal having the straight hair than having just healthy curly hair. So it is interesting how far it will take it.
And something I wanted to offer from the Middle East region, what we see often in North Africa a lot, especially with Nubians in Egypt, how a lot of Afro-Arabs are not really bestowed the same privileges and rights as more white-passing Arabs in the region, especially with texturism and colorism as well.
Yeah, it's pretty much anywhere there's colonialism, you have a huge problem. I think the only place where I've heard the opposite was I had a professor in college who it was both of their second marriages, and her husband had a son from his first marriage who his mother was from Mali, and his dad is white. He's a white Frenchman. And whenever he went back to Mali, he got bullied for being lighter skinned than the other people. But I think that's the only place where I've heard the opposite happen, where it is actually like doesn't come with, there's no tangible benefits from being lighter. If that makes sense.
And then you have, I know some of my friends are darker complexion, and other people will make fun of them, and they'll say, "Oh, you black ass," you hear me? Like, you hella black. And now it's like, the more I've grown, like in my consciousness, the more I'm like, man, like how Pac said, the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. Like, the closer you are, to your roots. So I actually look at it as being a beautiful thing, as some of us kind of, well, not some of us, but some people feel like, it's like it's ugly to be dark, or, have that color tone.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of stuff like that growing up too. I think it's also just like to have like Afro features. Like in Latin America, a lot of times they'll tell you to like, you gotta like pinch your nose to make it thinner. Or like when you blow your nose, you have to blow it where you pull it down, not so that you swipe it up. Otherwise your nose will be wide, and that's considered undesirable, which is pretty insane thinking about that. I also had this here as well. I would say this is not new, because again, we have in more, at least from my recollection, more so in the Jim Crow era, but we have minstrel shows that profited off of stereotypes of Black people. And if you don't know what those are, I would recommend looking them up. They're very upsetting. And when you watch them, if you haven't seen them before, all the actors are white men. So keep that in mind. Later on, Black people started to do it as well, because they needed money, and capitalism makes you do crazy things.
Are you happy here, honey? Are you finding what you really want from somebody else?
Then please, Mama, will you go? And never do this again. And if by accident we should ever pass on the street, please don't recognize me.
I won't, Sarah Jane. I promise.
Stand back. But it's my mother. Stand back. I'm telling you, it's my mother. Mama. Mama. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. I'm sorry, Mama. Mama, I did love you. Sarah Jane, don't! Miss Laura, I killed my mother.